Do you know the exact market value of a father's broken heart? My daughter, Kendra, and her husband, Marcus, think it's zero. They calculate the cost of getting rid of me like a spreadsheet entry, thinking my silence is shameful and my generosity is weak. But they're about to find out that the old man they call a burden has his own calculator. Why did I sell the house I built myself to a commercial developer for cash in less than 72 hours? Before I tell you exactly why I did it, let me know where you're viewing from in the comments, and subscribe if you believe you should never bite the hand that raised you. The phone rang just as I was scraping the last of the meatloaf from my ceramic plate. It was Martha's famous meatloaf recipe, though mine never tasted quite right without her special touch in the kitchen. I glanced at the caller ID and smiled despite the heaviness in my chest. Kendra, Dad, how are you holding up? Her voice carried that familiar warmth that always made my heart tighten with a mix of love and loneliness. I settled into Martha's old recliner, the leather worn smooth and soft from years of her evening reading sessions. Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just finished dinner and was about to watch the evening news. I did not mention it was leftovers from 3 days ago, or that I had been staring at Martha's photo on the mantel for the better part of an hour just waiting for the phone to ring. Are you eating enough because you know you can always order groceries online now, right? I showed you the app last time I was there. I am eating plenty, I interrupted gently, trying to sound stronger than I felt. Though I had a little scare yesterday, I forgot to turn off the burner under my coffee pot. Good thing I smelled it burning from the living room before it caused any real damage. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could picture her frowning in that way she had inherited from her mother, the same little crease appearing between her eyebrows when she was calculating something. Dad, maybe we should talk about getting someone to check on you more regularly. Marcus thinks I am fine, Kendra. Really? How is your business trip going? You are in Phoenix, right? Yes, the conference ends tomorrow. Marcus has been handling most of the client meetings while I sit through these endless presentations about digital marketing trends. She laughed, but it sounded forced and metallic through the speaker. Listen, Dad, I should probably get going. Marcus and I have dinner plans with some potential investors. Of course, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself, okay? I heard a click, then rustling sounds. She must have dropped the phone in her designer purse, I thought, reaching to hang up my end of the landline. But then I heard voices muffled but clear enough through her phone's microphone. Marcus, did you hear how weak he sounds? Kendra's voice was no longer warm and caring. It was sharp and cold. He forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. What if he burns the house down before we can list it? My hand froze on the receiver. Ice spread through my chest, numbing my fingers. It is time for a nursing home, Kendra. Marcus's voice was cold and matter-of-fact, like he was discussing a bad stock option. He is becoming a burden and you know it. Your dad is a decent man, but he cannot live alone anymore. The house is worth almost $1 million now in this market. Kendra's tone had shifted to pure calculation, devoid of any daughterly affection. With Denver's market booming, we could probably get $900,000, maybe more if we stage it right. Exactly. Marcus sounded pleased. We could sell it, put him somewhere decent, not too expensive, and finally buy that estate in Boulder we have been looking at. The one with the mountain view and the 4-car garage. My daughter laughed. She actually laughed. God, Marcus, you should have seen him tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea we are planning this. The longer we wait, the more confused he will get. We should strike while he still trusts us completely. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor Martha and I had installed together 23 years ago. Every board laid by my own hands, every nail driven with thoughts of our family's future. I sat in the sudden silence of my empty house, staring at the receiver on the floor. Martha's eyes seemed to bore into mine, from the silver frame on the end table, with an expression I could not quite read. Disappointment, warning, or maybe just the terrible knowledge that comes to those who have already left this world. The grandfather clock in the hallway, which was Martha's anniversary gift to me 15 years ago, ticked steadily in the growing darkness. Outside the first spring, crickets began their evening song in the garden Martha had planted, and I still tended with aching knees. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, replacing the warmth I had felt hearing my daughter's voice just moments before. My hands, weathered from decades of engineering work, slowly curled into fists on the arms of the leather chair. They thought I was a burden. They thought I was confused, helpless, ready to be managed and discarded like an old newspaper. They were already spending my money, already planning their new life in my grave. But I was not dead yet, and I was not nearly as confused as they believed. I do not know how long I sat there in the dark, Martha's face watching me from the silver frame. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had heard my daughter's betrayal and were holding their breath waiting for my reaction. My legs felt unsteady when I finally stood to turn on the lamp. The warm light fell across the living room we had furnished piece by piece, each item chosen with care and saved for with sacrifice. The burgundy sofa where Kendra used to curl up doing homework. The coffee table I had built in the garage, sanding it smooth while she played at my feet with her dolls. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept old receipts and papers. My fingers found the folder I was looking for without conscious thought. 20 years of financial records I had never thrown away because Martha always said you never know when you might need to prove exactly what you are worth. University of Colorado tuition receipts, $48,000 over 4 years. I remembered those double shifts coming home with concrete dust in my hair and plaster under my fingernails. Martha would have coffee waiting and would massage my shoulders while I paid bills at this very kitchen table. "Isaiah, you are working yourself to death," she had said one night, watching me calculate how to afford Kendra's spring semester. "She deserves better than we had, Martha. She is smart enough for anything." Martha had kissed the top of my head. "Just do not give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." I should have listened. God, I should have listened. The wedding receipts were in there too. $32,000 for one single day. I told Kendra we could afford 5,000, maybe 8 if we really stretched our savings, but she had cried, actually cried about wanting her dream wedding since she was a little girl. I had worked weekends for 6 months installing hardwood floors for a contractor friend who paid me under the table just to make that day happen. "Daddy, you are the best father in the world," she had whispered during our father-daughter dance, her head resting on my shoulder, her expensive wedding dress rustling against my rented tuxedo. "I will never forget this," she said. But she had forgotten, just like she had forgotten who co-signed her first car loan when her credit score was not good enough, just like she had forgotten who made the phone calls to get her that marketing job when she was unemployed for 8 months after graduation. I dug deeper into the pile and found the bank statements from 2 years ago after Marcus lost his financial advisor position for reasons they never fully explained to me. They had moved in temporarily just until Marcus found something new. I had never charged them a dime of rent. I had paid the increased utility bills, bought groceries for 3 adults instead of one lonely widower, and kept the thermostat higher than I liked because Kendra complained about the draft. Marcus would pat my shoulder and call me the most generous man in Colorado. Kendra would hug me and say, "Dad, we will pay you back every cent when we get on our feet." They had been on their feet for over a year now, both working good jobs, both making more money than I ever had in my prime. But they had never mentioned moving out back then, and they had certainly never mentioned paying me back. The anniversary dinner I had paid for last month, $200 at that fancy steakhouse downtown, because Marcus said they deserved to celebrate their resilience. The car repair bill I had covered when Marcus's BMW needed a new transmission, $3,000 that cleaned out my emergency fund completely. Isaiah is like a father to me. Marcus had told his friends at their last barbecue, his arm heavy around my shoulders. I am so lucky to have married into this family. I had been proud, actually proud, to be the generous father-in-law, the man who took care of his family, no matter what it cost him in sweat and worry. I walked upstairs to the bedroom Martha and I had shared, still unchanged after 2 years. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, her reading glasses folded beside the lamp just where she left them. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept our most important papers and pulled out our original house deed. Isaiah and Martha Hayes, purchased 1999. No liens, no co-signers, no complications. My name only now that Martha was gone. Standing there in the bedroom where Martha had spent her last days, surrounded by everything we had built together, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp as broken glass, but underneath it something harder was forming, like concrete setting in a foundation. They wanted to put me away and sell my life's work to strangers. They thought I was too old, too confused, too grateful for their scraps of attention to fight back. I looked at Martha's photo on the nightstand, remembering her voice from all those years ago. "Do not give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." Well, Martha, our daughter, had definitely forgotten, but she was about to remember that her old man was not as helpless as she thought. I walked to my home office and pulled out the business card I had kept in my desk drawer for 3 years. Elias Vance, corporate and estate attorney. Martha had insisted we meet with him after her cancer diagnosis, just to make sure our affairs were in order. It was time for another consultation. The next morning I walked through my house like a stranger, seeing it for the first time. But instead of seeing home, I was seeing what Kendra and Marcus saw: square footage, market value, liquid assets. In the kitchen, I ran my hand along the granite countertop. I had installed myself, working by lamplight after my regular job because we could not afford to hire contractors. Martha had picked out the pattern, speckled gray with veins of gold that caught the morning light. She had made coffee on this counter every morning for 16 years until the cancer took her strength away. I remembered the Christmas morning when 3-year-old Kendra took her first wobbly steps right here from the refrigerator to Martha's outstretched arms. We had both cried with joy, Martha scooping our daughter up and spinning her around while I scrambled for the camera. "Our baby is walking in our house," Martha had whispered, tears streaming down her face. "In the house we built for her." The living room held 25 years of Christmas mornings. I could still see 7-year-old Kendra's face lighting up at the sight of the dollhouse I had spent 3 months building in the garage, working in secret after she had gone to bed. Martha had sewn tiny curtains for the windows, made miniature furniture from cardboard and fabric scraps. "Daddy, it is just like our house," Kendra had squealed. And it was. I had made it a perfect replica down to the little bay window in what represented her bedroom. That bay window had cost me 6 months of overtime. Martha had seen it in a magazine and fallen in love with the idea of reading there in the afternoons. I had learned to cut angles I had never cut before, measured and remeasured until my back ached from crawling around the frame. "Isaiah, we cannot afford this," Martha had worried when she saw me marking measurements on the wall. "You want it, you will have it," I told her. "I will make it work." I climbed the stairs to Kendra's old room, still painted the soft yellow she had chosen for her 16th birthday, still decorated with photos of her high school friends and college memories. The room where I had rocked her through colicky nights as a baby, where Martha and I had helped her with algebra homework at the small white desk I had built to fit perfectly under the window. The master bedroom was the hardest. Martha's side of the bed still had her water glass on the nightstand, her bookmark still marking page 247 of the novel she would never finish. I had built these walk-in closets with my own hands, custom designed to fit Martha's height perfectly. Her clothes still hung there, still smelling faintly of her perfume. This was the room where we had planned our future, where we had whispered about our dreams for Kendra, where Martha had died holding my hand while machines beeped around us. "Promise me you will not let them take advantage of you," she had said near the end, her voice barely a whisper. "You are too good, Isaiah, too generous. Promise me you will take care of yourself." I had promised, but I had not kept that promise, had I? In my home office, I found the folder of construction photos Martha had kept. Pictures of me laying the foundation in the spring of 1999, 25 years younger and 50 pounds stronger. Me and my crew installing the frame. Martha in her hard hat bringing us lemonade on hot summer days, her belly just starting to show with Kendra. The financial records from those years told the story Martha's photos could not. Second mortgage personal loan from my brother. Martha taking a part-time job at the school district to help with materials costs. We had eaten beans and rice for months, drove cars held together with prayer and duct tape, but we had built this house with our sweat, our sacrifice, our love for each other and for the family we were creating. And now my daughter, the baby who had taken her first steps in this kitchen, the child who had played in the yard I had landscaped by hand, wanted to sell it all and put me away like an inconvenient piece of furniture. I picked up Elias Vance's business card from my desk drawer. The edges were worn from 3 years of handling, but the phone number was still clear. Kendra and Marcus thought they were dealing with a confused old man who would be grateful for any scrap of attention they threw him. They thought I was weak, helpless, ready to hand over my life's work without a fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I dialed Elias's number and listened to it ring, my hands steady as stone. The conversation with Elias was brief and professional. He did not ask for details over the phone, simply telling me to come to his office the following afternoon and to bring every scrap of financial evidence I could find. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in years. The grandfather clock chimed midnight, but I did not go to sleep. Instead, I spent the rest of the night sorting through the papers on my kitchen table, separating the necessary expenses from the parasites that had been feeding on my retirement for too long. When the sun finally rose over the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold, I was already dressed in my good wool coat. I drank my coffee black, standing by the kitchen window watching the neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Higgins across the street was walking her pug just as she did every morning at 6. The paperboy was tossing newspapers onto driveways. It was a normal Tuesday for everyone else, but for me it was the first day of a war I never wanted to fight. I drove to the bank branch where I had been a customer for 40 years, arriving just as the manager, Mrs. Gable, was unlocking the front glass doors. She smiled when she saw me, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, unlike the ones I had been getting from my own family lately. "Mr. Hayes, you are here early. Come on in and I will get the coffee started." I followed her into the quiet lobby, the smell of floor wax and old money filling the air. I sat in the chair across from her desk, the same chair where Martha and I had sat to open our joint savings account 3 decades ago. "Mrs. Gable, I need to make some changes to my accounts today." She pulled up my file on her computer screen, her fingers clicking rhythmically against the keyboard. "Of course, Mr. Hayes. What sort of changes are we looking at?" I took a deep breath. "I need to remove the authorized user privileges from my daughter Kendra and my son-in-law Marcus." Mrs. Gable stopped typing and looked up over her glasses, her expression turning serious. "Completely, Mr. Hayes. That includes the emergency credit line and the overdraft protection linked to their checking accounts." "Completely," I said, my voice steady. "And I need to transfer the bulk of my liquid savings into a trust account. I understand you cannot set up the trust instantly, but I want the funds moved to a holding account that only I can access effectively, freezing them out as of this moment." She nodded slowly, not asking why, because she was a professional, but I saw the understanding in her eyes. She had likely seen the transaction history, seen the spa days and the golf trips and the fancy dinners charged to the account I had set up for emergencies. I watched her work, clicking boxes and typing commands that would sever the financial umbilical cord I had foolishly left intact for too long. It took 45 minutes to untangle the knots of dependency I had allowed them to tie. When she finally printed the confirmation pages, I signed them with a flourish. One signature to cut off the credit card Kendra used for her wardrobe updates. Another signature to revoke the overdraft protection that covered Marcus's bad investments. A final signature to move my life savings out of their reach forever. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," I said, standing up and buttoning my coat. "You have been very helpful." She walked me to the door. "You take care of yourself, Mr. Hayes," she said softly. "I intend to," I replied. Walking back to my truck, I checked my watch. It was 8:30 in the morning. Kendra would be on her way to the convention center in Phoenix, stopping at her favorite coffee chain for a $6 latte and a croissant. Marcus would be driving to his office, probably stopping for gas or breakfast. I sat in the driver's seat of my truck and pulled out my phone, opening the banking app I had barely used until today. I wanted to see it happen. I wanted to see the moment reality crashed into their entitled little lives. Did not have to wait long. At 8:42, a notification popped up on my screen. "Transaction declined, Starbucks Phoenix AZ $6.45. I stared at the words, feeling a grim satisfaction settle in my gut. I could picture Kendra standing at the counter holding up the line, her perfect eyebrows furrowed in confusion. She would swipe the card again, thinking it was a mistake. She would smile apologetically at the barista and try a third time. But the machine would not care about her smile or her expensive suit. The machine only knew that the well had run dry. A minute later, another notification. "Transaction declined, Shell Station, Denver CO $52. Marcus." He was probably trying to fill up that BMW I was paying for. Speaking of the car, that was the next item on my list. I dialed the number for the insurance agency I had been with since 1985. "Bob," the agent answered on the second ring. "Isaiah, good to hear from you. How is the house treating you?" "It is just fine, Bob, but I need to make a change to my policy effective immediately. I want to cancel the coverage on the 22 BMW X5. There was a pause on the line. "Isaiah, that is Marcus's car, isn't it? The one you are the primary policy holder on." "That is correct, Bob. If you cancel the policy, the registry will be notified automatically. They could suspend the registration within 48 hours if he does not get his own coverage. I know how it works, Bob. Just cancel it. And while you are at it, cancel the premium roadside assistance package I added for them." I hung up the phone and leaned back against the headrest, closing my eyes. I could imagine the warning light flashing on Marcus's dashboard as the remote monitoring service disconnected. He would curse and bang the steering wheel, blaming the car, blaming the technology, blaming everything except his own greed. They would be scrambling now, calling the bank, calling the insurance company, trying to figure out why the world had suddenly stopped spinning in their favor. They would never suspect it was me. Thought I was the confused old man eating leftovers in the dark. They would blame computer glitches or banking errors. They had no idea that the road had just ended. I put the truck in gear and drove toward downtown to meet Elias Vance. The morning traffic was heavy, but I did not mind. For the first time in months, I felt like I was driving towards something instead of just waiting for the end. For 2 years, I had grieved Martha in silence, while quietly spending every dollar we'd saved together just to keep my daughter's affection, believing that if I gave enough, she would never abandon the lonely old man I'd become. But you cannot buy loyalty, and you certainly cannot buy love from people who only see you as a line item on a spreadsheet. I merged onto the highway, the city skyline rising ahead of me. No more a disposable line item on their balance sheet. From this moment, the price of their betrayal would be the highest they'd ever pay. My phone buzzed again with a text message from Kendra. "Dad, are you okay? I tried to buy coffee and the card you gave me isn't working. You might want to call the bank, they must be having system issues." I read the message and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat without replying. Let her drink the hotel coffee, I thought. Let her wonder why her golden ticket had suddenly turned to lead. The system was not having issues. The system was finally working exactly the way it was supposed to. I parked near Elias Vance's office, but I did not go up immediately. I sat there in the cab of my truck watching my phone screen, which had become a window into the chaos I had unleashed. At 12:15, a new alert appeared. The Capitol Grill, Phoenix AZ, $412. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. Kendra always took her high-value clients there. She would be sitting at the best table, wearing her power suit, laughing at their jokes and ordering the most expensive wine on the list. She loved playing the successful executive, the woman who could pick up a $400 lunch tab without blinking. I could see her signaling the waiter with that imperious wave of her hand, tossing my platinum card onto the leather check presenter. She would not even look at the bill because that was part of the performance. But the performance was about to crash. The alert on my phone was not a receipt. It was a rejection. Transaction declined. I imagined the waiter walking back to the table. He would lean in close, trying to be discreet but not discreet enough. "I am sorry, ma'am, but this card has been declined." Kendra would freeze. She would laugh, that nervous laugh she used when she was cornered. "Try it again," she would say loud enough for the clients to hear. "It is a bank error." But the waiter would shake his head. "We tried it twice, ma'am. Do you have another form of payment?" And there was the trap. Kendra did not have another form of payment. Not for a bill that size. Her personal cards were maxed out on shoes and handbags. She would have to ask the clients to pay. I could feel her humiliation radiating across 500 miles. The silent car ride back to the convention center. The whispered questions. The loss of face. She had built her entire identity on being the rich, successful daughter of a wealthy family. In 30 seconds I had stripped that away. But I did not have time to dwell on Kendra's lunch because my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from the insurance carrier. Policy cancellation confirmed. Followed immediately by a text from the roadside assistance service attached to my account. Towing service requested. Location 16th Street Mall, Denver. Reason uninsured vehicle on public road. I let out a breath that was half sigh, half laugh. Marcus. He must have parked the BMW in front of his co-working space, that fancy glass building where he rented a desk to play pretend stockbroker. The city of Denver had automated license plate readers now. No insurance means no registration. No registration means you get towed. I pictured Marcus walking out of his building, spinning his keys on his finger, ready to drive to a late lunch. He would stop on the sidewalk, blinking at the empty space where his pride and joy used to be. He would look up and down the street thinking it was stolen. He would panic, calling the police, only to be told that his car was in the impound lot because the owner canceled the insurance. The owner. Me. My phone started ringing 10 seconds later. Marcus. I watched his name flash on the screen. The ringtone sounded desperate. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Kendra this time. They were communicating now, sharing their disasters, connecting the dots but drawing the wrong picture. They would not blame me. Not yet. They would blame the bank, blame the insurance company's incompetence. They would tell themselves that Dad is just a confused old man who probably forgot to pay a bill or pressed the wrong button on his computer. They could not conceive of a world where I would intentionally hurt them, because to them, I was not a person with feelings and limits. I was a resource, a gold mine that had suddenly stopped producing ore. I listened to the voicemail Marcus left. Isaiah, pick up the phone. The bank is messing everything up. My car got towed and Kendra's card is frozen. You need to call them right now and authorize these charges. We are losing money here, Isaiah. Call me back immediately. No concern for me. No asking if I was okay. just in order to fix the flow of money. I turned off the ringer and stepped out of my truck. The air was crisp and cold, biting at my cheeks, but I welcomed it. I walked into the lobby of the high-rise building where Elias Vance worked. The marble floors echoed with the click of expensive shoes. I was wearing my best suit, the charcoal one Martha loved, but I still felt like a blue-collar imposter in this world of glass and steel. Yet I had something these people respected more than pedigree. I had liquid capital and a righteous cause. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor, watching the city shrink beneath me. Up here, the cars looked like toys. The people looked like ants. It gave you a sense of detachment, a sense of power. I checked my phone one last time before entering the office. A text from Kendra. Leaving Phoenix now. Taking the early flight back. We need to sort this out tonight, Dad. Please be home. We need to talk. I stared at the message. They were coming. They were rushing back, not to comfort me but to secure their assets. The minor inconveniences of the day, the declined lunch and the towed car, had spooked them. They realized how fragile their lifestyle actually was. Needed to lock down the source. They needed me in that nursing home, and they needed that power of attorney signed before any more glitches ruined their social standing. But they did not know I had already fortified the castle. I put the phone in my pocket and pushed open the heavy glass doors of Vance and Associates. The receptionist looked up, her smile professional and bright. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Vance is expecting you. Go right back. I walked down the hallway past rows of framed degrees and awards. I was walking into the belly of the beast to sharpen my sword. Tonight, Kendra and Marcus would come to my house expecting a confused old man who had made a banking error. Instead, they were going to walk into a trap laid by a father who had finally learned the difference between generosity and enabling. Elias Vance did not smile when I entered his office. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the gray Denver skyline, his hands clasped behind his back. The room smelled of mahogany and expensive coffee, the scent of serious business. Isaiah, have a seat. He gestured to the leather chair opposite his massive desk without turning around. I sat down, placing my hands on my knees, trying to stop them from trembling. The adrenaline of the morning was fading, replaced by a cold dread. Elias turned and walked to his desk, picking up a thick manila folder. He did not open it immediately. Instead, he looked at me with an expression that was part pity and part professional detachment. You asked me to dig deep, Isaiah. You asked me to find out why your son-in-law was so desperate for cash and why your daughter was suddenly so interested in your estate planning. I knotted my throat, too tight to speak. I did. Elias dropped the folder onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud that seemed to echo in the quiet room. I found it. And Isaiah, it is worse than we thought. Much worse. He opened the file, spreading documents across the polished wood surface. Bank statements, police reports, and grainy surveillance photos. I looked at the first photo. It showed Marcus standing on a street corner downtown, arguing with a man I did not recognize. The man was large, wearing a leather jacket, and he had his hand on Marcus's chest, pushing him back against a brick wall. That was taken 3 days ago, Elias said, pointing to the date stamp. The man pushing your son-in-law is an associate of a private lending group operating out of Aurora. They are loan sharks, Isaiah, and not the kind who send polite letters when you miss a payment. I stared at the photo. Marcus looked terrified, his usual arrogance replaced by sweat and fear. How much? I whispered. Elias flipped a page. Principal and interest combined, he owes them just over $200,000. He borrowed it 6 months ago to cover his tracks at the firm. Cover his tracks. I looked up at Elias. I thought he was laid off due to budget cuts. Elias shook his head slowly. Marcus was not laid off. He was fired for cause. He was skimming from client accounts. Embezzlement. He thought he could pay it back before anyone noticed by gambling on high-risk crypto futures. He lost everything. The firm let him go quietly to avoid a scandal, but they made him sign a restitution agreement. He has been using the money you give them for bills to pay back the firm, so they do not press criminal charges. But that left him with nothing for the loan sharks. I felt sick. My stomach churned as I looked at the web of lies my family had spun. And Kendra, I asked, hoping against hope, does she know? Elias pulled out another sheet of paper. It was a joint tax return, unsigned but filled out. She knows about the job loss. She knows about the debt to the firm. I do not think she knows about the sharks in Aurora yet, but she knows they are drowning. She knows they are 1 month away from losing everything. Their condo, their cars, their reputation. That is why they are pushing for the nursing home, Isaiah. It is not about your health. It never was. They need to sell your house immediately to pay off the sharks before the deadline next week. If they miss that payment, Marcus is in physical danger. They are trying to save their lives by sacrificing yours. I sat back in the chair, feeling the blood drain from my face. It was not just greed. It was desperation. They were cornered animals, and I was the piece of meat they planned to throw to the wolves to save themselves. That house in Boulder, I said, remembering their phone conversation. The one with the mountain view. Elias tapped a document on the desk. A fabrication. There is no offer on a house in Boulder. They need you to believe they are buying a new home, so you will sign over the proceeds from your sale. Once the money hits their account, it will vanish into the pockets of criminals, and you will be left rotting in a state facility with nothing. The cruelty of it took my breath away. They were willing to lock me away, to strip me of my dignity and my memories just to clean up Marcus's mess. I looked at the photo of Marcus again. I had welcomed him into my family. I had treated him like a son, and this was his repayment. A plot to liquidate my life to pay for his crimes. Elias leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. Listen to me carefully, Isaiah. You are in a very dangerous position. Because you have been supporting them, because your name is on their car insurance and some of their credit cards. These creditors could try to come after you. They could try to argue that you are a guarantor. We need to separate you from them completely, and we need to do it now. Tonight. I thought about the text message from Kendra. They were rushing back from Phoenix. They would be at my door in a few hours, desperate and dangerous. What do I do? I asked. Elias closed the folder. You proceed with the sale, but not on their terms. I have a contact, a commercial developer who has been trying to buy up lots in your neighborhood for a luxury condo project. He does not care about the house. He wants the land. He pays cash and he closes fast. If we get the paperwork started today, we can close by Friday. You sell the house yourself, Isaiah. You take the money, and you put it in the irrevocable trust we discussed. You make yourself judgment-proof, and you let Marcus and Kendra face their own consequences. I stood up my legs, feeling steady again. The sickness in my stomach had hardened into a cold resolve. Do it, I said. Call your developer. I want to sell. Elias nodded, reaching for his phone. And tonight when they come over, what will you do? I straightened my tie, looking at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. I saw a man who had been pushed too far. A man who was done being the victim. I am going to give them exactly what they want, Elias. I am going to give them a confused old man who is ready to sign anything. I am going to give them hope. Because the higher they climb, the harder they fall. And when they hit the bottom, I want them to know exactly why. I left the office with the dossier tucked under my arm. Evidence. Ammunition. The sun was setting over the mountains, casting long shadows across the city. The city where I had built my life. The city where my daughter was speeding down the highway, planning my destruction. Let them come. I was ready for them now. I had the truth in my hands and a plan in my heart. The drive home was quiet. I did not turn on the radio. I needed to focus. I needed to prepare for the performance of a lifetime. I parked my truck in the garage and walked into the kitchen. I looked at the empty counters, the silent rooms. For a moment I felt a pang of sadness for the little girl who used to sit here eating cereal and telling me about her dreams. But that little girl was gone, replaced by a stranger who would sell her father to save a thief. I took off my suit jacket and loosened my tie, messed up my hair slightly. I went to the living room and pulled a blanket off the sofa, draping it over my shoulders. I sat in Martha's recliner and waited. I practiced making my hands shake, and practiced the vacant look I had seen in the eyes of men who had given up. I knew how to build things, but tonight I would learn how to destroy. The headlights of a rental sedan swept across the living room wall, cutting through the gloom I had carefully cultivated. I stayed frozen in Martha's recliner, pulling the wool blanket tighter around my shoulders until it sat high up on my neck. I needed to look smaller. I needed to look like a man whose world was shrinking. The front door opened with a sudden, violent jerk, as if they had expected it to be locked against them. "Dad!" Kendra's voice echoed in the entryway, sharp and frantic. I did not answer immediately. I let my head loll slightly to the side, staring blankly at the unlit television screen. They rushed into the living room, bringing the cold night air and the smell of stress with them. Kendra looked disheveled, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy knot, her eyes red-rimmed and wide. Marcus looked worse. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt, with sweat stains under the arms despite the chill, and his eyes were darting around the room as if he expected the loan sharks to jump out from behind the curtains. "Dad, are you okay?" Kendra asked, dropping her purse on the floor and kneeling beside my chair. She put a hand on my knee. Her palm was clammy. I slowly turned my head to look at her, blinking rapidly as if I was having trouble focusing. "Kendra," I whispered, letting my voice crack. "Is that you?" I fell asleep waiting. "I think I missed the news." "Jesus, Isaiah," Marcus snapped, pacing behind her. "We have been calling you for hours. The bank accounts are frozen. The credit cards are declining. The insurance on the car is canceled. What did you do?" I flinched physically, shrinking away from his shouting. It was not hard to act afraid. The desperation radiating off him was genuinely terrifying. "I do not know, Marcus," I stammered, making my hands tremble beneath the blanket. "I went to the bank this morning to check the balance. The lady there, Mrs. Gable, she said something about security updates. I think I pressed the wrong button on the keypad. Now nothing works. I tried to buy milk, but I could not find my card." I looked down at my hands, rubbing them together nervously. "I am so confused lately. I just wanted to fix it, but I think I broke it." Kendra looked at Marcus, and I saw the relief wash over them, a wave of pure, toxic relief. They believed it. I was just a senile old man who had fumbled his passwords. It was not malice to them. It was incompetence, and incompetence they could handle. "See, I told you," Marcus exhaled, running a hand through his thinning hair. "It is the security algorithms. He triggered a fraud alert, and it locked everything down." He looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You really made a mess of things this time, Isaiah." "I am sorry," I mumbled, staring at the floor. "I just wanted to help." "Well, you can help us fix it," Kendra said, her voice taking on that sickly sweet tone she used when she wanted something. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick blue folder. "We knew something like this might happen, Dad. You are getting older, and these financial systems are getting so complicated. We want to make sure you never have to worry about bills or passwords again." She opened the folder and smoothed a document onto the coffee table. It was a durable power of attorney granting them full unrestricted access to all my assets, real estate, and accounts. It was a license to steal everything I had ever worked for. Marcus stepped forward, clicking a pen and holding it out to me. "Just sign right here, Isaiah. This gives us permission to go to the bank for you and unlock the accounts. We can get the cards working again and make sure your insurance is reinstated. Then we can take you to that resort we talked about, the one with the medical staff." I looked at the pen, then at the paper. I looked at Kendra. Is it nice there?" I asked, letting a tear leak out of my eye. "It is beautiful, Dad," she lied without blinking. "It is like a vacation that never ends. And you will be safe there. No more confusing bank visits. No more worries. Just rest." I reached out a shaking hand and took the pen. I held it over the signature line, watching the ink tip hover inches from my destruction. I could feel them holding their breath. They were so close. They could almost taste the money. The $200,000 for the sharks, the rest for their vanity. I let the pen touch the paper, making a tiny dot, then I pulled it back. I can't," I whispered, dropping the pen onto the document. Marcus made a noise in his throat like a growling dog. "What do you mean you can't?" "Sign the damn paper, Isaiah." "I need to say goodbye," I said, looking up at them with wide, pleading eyes. "To the house, to Martha's garden. I cannot just sign and leave. This is my home." Marcus looked ready to grab my hand and force the signature, but Kendra stopped him with a sharp look. She turned back to me, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Of course, Dad. We understand. But we really need to get this sorted out fast." "The bank, Monday," I interrupted softly. "Give me the weekend. Let me spend one last weekend here with your mother's memory. I will pack my things. I will say my goodbyes. Come back Monday morning, and I will sign everything. I will go wherever you want. I just need a little time." Marcus looked at his watch, calculating. Today was Tuesday. Monday was 6 days away. The loan shark deadline was likely next week. He looked at Kendra and gave a tight, almost imperceptible nod. They figured they had me. I was not going anywhere. I was confused, helpless, and pliable. A few days wouldn't change anything in their minds except to make me more willing to leave. "Okay, Dad," Kendra said, patting my hand again. "Monday morning, we will be here at 9 sharp. You pack your essentials. We will handle the rest." "Monday," I repeated, nodding slowly. Monday, everything changes. Marcus snatched the papers and the pen off the table, shoving them back into the folder. Do not touch the computer, Isaiah. Do not try to go to the bank alone. You might lock it down permanently and then we will be in real trouble. Just sit tight and eat your leftovers. We will bring you groceries on Monday. No tea was offered or accepted. No one asked whether the house felt too quiet without Martha. Kendra and Marcus simply rose, already pulled by the magnet of their next move. Papers signed by a supposedly failing old man. That was enough for tonight. Timeline secured. Prey secured. Love you, Dad. Kendra tossed back without turning, hand on the doorknob. See you Monday. Then the door shut, and the night swallowed them. The door slammed. Their footsteps faded down the walk. The rental car coughed to life and vanished into the night. I waited another 60 seconds in perfect stillness, counting heartbeats instead of breaths. Then the wool blanket slid from my shoulders to the floor. My knees stayed steady. My hands stayed calm. I crossed the room, parted the curtains, and watched the last flicker of red taillights turn the corner and disappear. Monday, I said aloud to the empty house, my voice clear, low, and utterly unafraid. You believe Monday is when you come to collect. Monday is when the house stops being yours. I walked to the kitchen, opened the pantry, took out the burner phone I'd kept hidden behind the flour tin, and dialed Elias Vance. Voicemail picked up on the second ring. They swallowed the whole act, I told the recording. They're gone. Clock starts now. We have until Monday. Sell it. Sell everything. I hung up and looked around the kitchen. The performance was over. The stage was set. I had 6 days to erase 40 years of history and turn this house into a fortress. I had 6 days to turn their greed into their prison. I walked to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water, drinking it in long, cool gulps. My hand was steady as a rock. The confused old man had left the building. The engineer was back in charge. Wednesday morning broke clean and sharp, the first day in months without dread coiled in the chest. No weight of a nursing home future. Only the cold, clear focus of a man racing a ticking clock. At 8:15 the phone rang. Elias Vance wasted no words. Apex Development wants the lot. Not the house, the dirt. Keystone parcel for their mid-rise. $950 cash. Closing Friday if title clears. They'll even lease it back 2 weeks so you can move. Sign, and the money hits the trust same day. $950,000. 50 grand more than Marcus had bragged the house was worth. 50 grand they would never touch. Do it, came the answer, flat and final, while the contracts flew through email. Blue painter's tape appeared in steady hands. Room by room the house was walked, labels slapped on what mattered and what did not. Martha's earring box, the quilt stitched through the winter of '98. The honeymoon photo from Santa Fe, wind whipping her hair across the lens. 4 cartons in all, 40 years reduced to what fit in the trunk of a sedan. Everything else, leather, china, oak, was scheduled for charity pickup Monday at 1, long after the prey had walked in and seen the prize still gleaming. At 2 o'clock a kid in a tailored suit circled the yard with an iPad, eyes only on boundary stakes and soil grade. Flat lot, easy excavation. The house itself earned no glance, just an obstacle to be erased. A week ago that would have cut deep. Today it felt like balance. Paperwork signed on the porch. Demo could start any time after the weekend. Money wired Friday. Handshake. Gone. The basement safe opened with the old familiar clicks. Original deed. Insurance policies. The small velvet bag holding Martha's engagement ring, once meant for Kendra's finger, now slipped into a pocket instead. Some things greed would never be allowed to reset. By sunset the living room already felt rented, temporary, like a stage set waiting for the final scene. 4 boxes stood stacked by the door. The bank alert chimed. Wire incoming, trust armed. One last call went out. To the locksmith who did emergency jobs for cash and asked no questions. New high-security cylinders. Every tumbler changed by Friday close of business. The rest was just scenery for the final act. I stood up and dusted off my pants. I had one more call to make. The locksmith. Because when I walked out of here on Friday, I wanted to make sure that no key in Kendra's possession would ever turn a tumbler in my door again. If they wanted to get into this house, they would have to break it down. And knowing Marcus, he would probably try. Thursday was a blur of logistics, but Friday was the day of execution. I woke up before the alarm, feeling a strange vibration in my chest that I recognized as anticipation. I dressed in my best suit, the one I had worn to Kendra's graduation, and drove to the title company office downtown. The conference room was glass and steel, cold and efficient, exactly the way I wanted this transaction to be. The representatives from Apex Development were already there, sitting with their legal team. There were no pleasantries about the weather or questions about my family. There was just a stack of documents about 2 inches thick waiting for my signature. I sat down and picked up the heavy pen they offered. This was not just a real estate transaction. It was an amputation. I was cutting off the limb that had been poisoning my life. I signed my name over and over. Isaiah Hayes, Isaiah Hayes, Isaiah Hayes. With each signature, the house that I had built with my own hands became less mine and more theirs. It became an asset on a balance sheet instead of a home. When I signed the final deed transfer, the lead attorney nodded to his paralegal. "Initiate the wire," he said. I checked my phone 2 minutes later. The notification from the trust account Elias had set up popped onto the screen. Incoming wire transfer, $950,000. I stared at the number. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It was enough to buy a house in Boulder. It was enough to pay off loan sharks. It was enough to save Marcus from his own stupidity. But it wasn't going to do any of those things. It was going to sit in a secure trust, earning interest and protecting my future. "Thank you, gentlemen," I said, standing up. "The house is yours." Technically, I had a 2-week leaseback to move out, but I had no intention of staying that long. I drove straight from the title company to the Meridian, a high-security luxury apartment complex I had scouted online the night before. It was the kind of place that required a key fob just to enter the parking garage and a biometric thumbprint to access the elevators. I met the leasing agent in the lobby, a polished young woman named Jessica. "I need a 2-bedroom unit on a high floor," I told her. "I need it available immediately, and I am paying a year of rent in advance." Jessica's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "We have a penthouse unit available on the 12th floor, Mr. Hayes. It has a view of the mountains and 24-hour security concierge." I took it without looking at the price. Security was my priority now. I signed the lease digitally and handed over a cashier's check for the deposit and first year. By 2 o'clock, I had the keys to my new fortress. I moved my 4 boxes of essentials into the spacious master bedroom, which smelled of fresh paint and expensive carpet. I placed Martha's jewelry box on the dresser and her photo on the nightstand. "We are safe here, Martha," I whispered. "No one can get to us here." But my work was not done. I had one final stop to make before the sun went down. I drove back to the house, my old house, for the final stage of the trap. The locksmith I had called was waiting in his van in the driveway. He was a burly man with a tool belt that looked serious. "I want industrial-grade deadbolts on every exterior door," I told him. "The kind you cannot pick, the kind you cannot bump. And I want them keyed to a single master key that strictly says do not duplicate." He nodded, appreciating the request. "You got security issues, sir?" he asked, pulling a heavy drill from his van. "You could say that," I replied. I watched him work, removing the decorative brass locks Martha and I had chosen together and replacing them with heavy, brushed steel mechanisms that clicked with a satisfying finality. These were not welcoming locks. These were locks designed to keep the world out. While he worked on the doors, I went inside to install the eyes. I had stopped at an electronics store on the way and bought a high-definition home security system. 3 tiny cameras, wireless, motion-activated. I placed one on the bookshelf in the living room nestled between 2 hardcover encyclopedias. I placed the second in the entryway hidden atop the grandfather clock. The third I placed in the kitchen looking directly at the back door. I connected the hub to the internet and linked the feed to a cloud server Elias had secured for me. I pulled up the app on my phone. The picture was crystal clear. I could see my empty living room. I could see the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. Everything was recorded. Everything was backed up. When Kendra and Marcus arrived on Monday, they would not just be walking into a locked house. They would be walking onto a stage. Every lie they told, every threat they made, every tantrum they threw would be captured in high-definition audio and video. It would be the final piece of evidence Elias needed to ensure they never got a dime from me again. The locksmith finished at 5 o'clock. "That will be $600, sir," he said, handing me a single heavy key. I paid him in cash. He drove away, leaving me alone in the driveway. I walked to the front door and inserted the new key. It turned with a smooth, heavy resistance. Click, thud. The bolt slid home, sealing the house tight. I tested the handle. It was immovable. I went to the back door and did the same. Locked. The garage keypad. Disabled. I walked to the street and looked back at the house one last time. It looked exactly the same as it always had. The lawn was mowed. The windows were clean. It looked like a welcoming family home waiting for its children to return. But it was a mirage. It was a hollow shell filled with cameras and locked doors. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a lesson waiting to be taught. I got into my truck and drove away without looking back. My phone sat on the passenger seat, displaying the live feed from the living room. The house was empty and silent, waiting for the storm that was coming on Monday morning. I drove to the Meridian and parked in my assigned spot in the secure garage. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor, using my thumbprint to verify my identity. I walked into my new apartment and poured myself a glass of water. I stood by the window looking out at the city lights flickering on in the twilight. Somewhere out there, in that sea of lights, Kendra and Marcus were probably toasting to their success. They were probably spending the weekend relaxing, thinking they had won, thinking the old man was packed and ready to go. I took a sip of water and smiled a cold, hard smile. "Enjoy your weekend, children," I said to the glass, because Monday is going to be a very long day. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate. From the 12th floor of the Meridian, I watched the city wake up beneath a blanket of low clouds. I sat in my leather armchair with a cup of black coffee in one hand and my tablet in the other. The screen displayed the live feed from the cameras I had installed 3 days ago. The picture was crisp and clear, showing my empty driveway and the quiet street where I had lived for half a century. At 8:55, a black sedan turned the corner. I recognized the aggressive driving style immediately. Marcus. He pulled into the driveway carrying too much speed and slammed on the brakes just inches from the garage door. A moment later, a second car pulled up behind him. It was a flashy silver sports car, the kind that screams new money. A man in a shiny suit stepped out, checking his gold watch. This must be the private buyer Elias had warned me about, the one they had lined up to flip the house to before the ink on my death certificate was even dry. Kendra stepped out of the black sedan. She was wearing a sharp business suit, but even through the camera lens I could see the tension in her shoulders. She smoothed her skirt and put on a bright, fake smile as she turned to greet the man in the silver car. I turned up the volume on my tablet. The microphone by the front door picked up their voices with painful clarity. "Mr. Sterling, so glad you could make it," Kendra said, extending her hand. "My father is expecting us. We can do a quick walkthrough, and if the terms are agreeable, we can sign the preliminary papers today." Sterling shook her hand briefly, looking at the house with hungry eyes. "I have cash in the trunk, Mrs. Reynolds," he said, his voice oily and smooth. "If the interior matches the photos, I am ready to close. I do not like waiting." "You will not have to wait," Marcus chimed in, walking around the car to join them. He was sweating despite the cool morning air. "Dad is packed and ready to go. Let's get this done." They walked up the path to the front door. I watched Kendra reach into her purse and pull out her key ring. She marched up to the door with the confidence of a woman who thought she owned the world. She slid her key into the lock. Or rather, she tried to. I watched her frown as the key refused to enter the new industrial cylinder. She pushed harder, jiggling it violently. "That is strange," she muttered. "What is it?" Marcus asked, stepping up behind her. "The key is sticking," she said. "It will not go in." "Here, let me try." Marcus grabbed the keys from her hand and jammed his own copy into the lock. It hit the metal guard and stopped dead. He twisted it hard enough to bend the brass, but the steel lock did not budge. "Damn it," he hissed. He must have locked the deadbolt from the inside. He raised his fist and pounded on the wood. "Isaiah, open up. It is us. We are here." Silence answered him. Inside the house, the cameras showed an empty hallway echoing with the thuds of his fist. "Isaiah," Marcus yelled louder. "Open the damn door." Mr. Sterling cleared his throat, looking at his watch again. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice losing its smooth edge. "No problem," Kendra said quickly, her voice pitching up an octave. He is a bit hard of hearing. He is probably in the back packing." "Marcus, go check the back door." I watched on the kitchen camera as Marcus ran around the side of the house. He threw himself at the back door, grabbing the handle and wrenching it down. It was locked solid. He tried his key there too. Nothing. He kicked the door in frustration, leaving a muddy scuff mark on the white paint. He ran back to the front, his face flushed with panic. "It is locked too," he whispered to Kendra, trying to keep his voice down, but the microphone caught every desperate syllable. "The keys do not work. He changed the locks, Kendra." "What do you mean he changed the locks?" she hissed. "He is senile, Marcus. He does not know how to change a light bulb, let alone a lock." Mr. Sterling stepped back toward his car, his patience evaporating. "Look, I was told this was a done deal. If the owner is not cooperating, I am not interested in a domestic dispute." "No, please wait," Kendra pleaded, grabbing his arm. "It is just a misunderstanding. He is expecting us." "Dad," she screamed at the house, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "Dad, open the door right now. This is not funny." Mrs. Higgins from across the street stepped out onto her porch, clutching her bathrobe. She stared at the scene unfolding in my driveway, her eyes wide behind her glasses. I saw her reach for her phone. The audience was assembling. Marcus was losing it. The pressure of the loan sharks, the debts, the lies, it was all crashing down on him in front of a locked door. He grabbed a heavy decorative stone from the garden border, the one Martha had painted with a sunflower years ago. He marched toward the living room window. "Marcus, no!" Kendra shrieked. But he did not stop. He raised the stone and smashed it against the glass. The sound of breaking glass was shocking and loud, tearing through the quiet morning. The security alarm I had installed instantly began to shriek, a piercing wail that could be heard 3 blocks away. Mr. Sterling did not wait. He jumped into his silver car and reversed out of the driveway, tires screeching, leaving black rubber marks on the pavement. He sped away, leaving my daughter and her husband alone in the wreckage of their plan. Marcus reached through the broken window, trying to unlock the sash, but I had screwed it shut from the inside. He cut his hand on a jagged shard of glass and pulled it back, cursing and dripping blood onto the flower bed. "Dad, stop this!" Kendra screamed at the house, tears streaming down her face. "You are ruining everything. Open the door. Why are you doing this to us?" Mrs. Higgins was shouting now from across the street. "I'm calling the police. You get away from that house." I watched Marcus spin around, wild-eyed. He looked like a trapped animal. He looked at the empty street where his buyer had fled. He looked at the blood on his hand. He looked at the house that was supposed to be his salvation. He ran back to the front door and started kicking it. Dull, heavy thuds that shook the frame but did not budge the steel bolts. "Open up, you old bastard," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You owe us this. You owe us." The siren started as a low whine in the distance, but it grew louder with every second. I sat in my high tower, sipping my coffee, feeling a cold detachment. I was not angry anymore. Anger requires heat, and I was made of ice. I watched my daughter sink to her knees on the porch, covering her ears against the wailing alarm. I watched Marcus lean his forehead against the door he could not open, defeated by a piece of metal and his own arrogance. They had come to collect a helpless old man. Instead, they had found a fortress, and now the world was coming to see what they had done. I tapped the screen on my tablet, zooming in on Kendra's face. She looked small. She looked terrified. For a brief second, I remembered the little girl with the scraped knee I used to comfort. But then I remembered the phone call. I remembered the nursing home brochure. I remembered the betrayal. And I watched without blinking as the first police cruiser turned the corner, lights flashing blue and red against the gray morning sky. 2 uniformed officers stepped out of the cruiser, with their hands resting near their holsters. The wailing alarm made communication difficult, so the taller officer shouted commands while gesturing sharply for Marcus to step away from the door. "Get on the ground," he yelled. Marcus hesitated, looking from the broken window to the police. He was bleeding, manic, and holding a bloody rock. In the eyes of the law, he was not a concerned relative. He was a violent intruder. I watched on my screen as Marcus dropped the rock and sank to his knees in the dirt. Kendra was screaming something about a medical emergency, about her father being trapped inside, but the officers were not listening yet. They were securing the scene. One officer moved to cuff Marcus while the other approached Kendra, keeping a safe distance. Just as the chaos seemed to be settling into a standard arrest procedure, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb behind the police cruiser. The rear door opened, and Elias Vance stepped out. He looked like the Grim Reaper in a tailored Italian suit. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and adjusted his glasses with the other. He walked up the driveway with the calm authority of a man who owned the situation. I turned the volume up to maximum. I did not want to miss a single word of this eulogy for my family. Elias approached the officers who were patting Marcus down. "Officer, my name is Elias Vance. I represent Mr. Isaiah Hayes and the current property owners." Marcus lifted his head from the pavement, his face streaked with sweat and dirt. "Elias," he rasped, desperate for an ally. "Tell them, Tell them I have power of attorney. Tell them my father-in-law is inside and confused." Elias looked down at Marcus with an expression of mild distaste, as if he had stepped in something unpleasant. "Actually, that is not correct," Elias said smoothly, pulling a document from his briefcase. The officers paused, looking at the paperwork. "Mr. Hayes is not inside. He moved out 3 days ago, and he is certainly not confused. In fact, he is quite lucid." Kendra stopped crying and stared at the lawyer. "Moved out," she whispered. "What do you mean, moved out?" Elias turned to her, handing a copy of the deed to the officer. The property at 1247 Maple Street was sold last Friday to Apex Development Trust. The transfer was recorded with the county clerk at 4 p.m. Mr. Hayes no longer owns this home. You are currently trespassing on commercial property and attempting to break and enter. "Sold," Marcus screamed, struggling against the cuffs. "That is a lie. He cannot sell it without us. We are his caretakers." Elias ignored him, addressing the officer again. "Furthermore, I have evidence here regarding the gentleman in handcuffs." He handed a thick manila envelope to the taller officer. "Inside you will find sworn affidavits from the partners at Marcus's former financial firm regarding the embezzlement of client funds. You will also find a police report filed this morning regarding his association with known illegal lending syndicates in Aurora. We believe he was attempting to gain entry to this property to strip assets to pay off criminal debts." Marcus went pale. The fight drained out of him instantly. He slumped against the squad car, his eyes wide with the realization that his secret life was no longer secret. Kendra looked at her husband with horror. "Embezzlement," she stammered. "Illegal lending. Marcus, what is he talking about?" Elias turned to Kendra, and his expression softened slightly, but only slightly. It was the look a surgeon gives before delivering a terminal diagnosis. "He did not tell you, Mrs. Reynolds. Your husband owes $200,000 to men who break legs for a living. He was planning to use your father's money to save his own skin." "No." Kendra shook her head, backing away. "No, that is not true. We were buying a house in Boulder. We were going to take care of Dad." Elias reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. It was the letter I had written. The final goodbye. "Your father asked me to give you this," Elias said, extending the envelope. "He wanted you to hear it from him." Kendra took the letter, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She tore open the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper. I recited the words in my head as I watched her read them, my lips moving in sync with her eyes scanning the page. "Dear Kendra and Marcus, if you are reading this, it means the locks worked. I heard you on the phone last week. I heard you call me a burden. I heard you planning to sell my home and put me in a warehouse so you could buy your mansion in Boulder. I heard every word. You thought I was deaf or senile, but I was just listening." I watched Kendra's hand fly to her mouth. A sob escaped her throat, a raw, ugly sound of pure guilt. She read on. "The house is sold. The money is in an irrevocable trust that you will never touch. I have moved to a place where I am safe from your greed. Do not look for me. I am not lost. I am finally free. You wanted my money more than you wanted my love. Now you have neither." The breakdown was total. Kendra collapsed onto the driveway, clutching the letter to her chest, wailing like a child who had lost her mother in a crowd. But she hadn't lost me. She had thrown me away. Marcus was being shoved into the back of the police cruiser, his head hung low, avoiding the gaze of the neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk. "Mrs. Higgins was shaking her head, pointing a finger at Marcus, telling the officer about the rock and the screaming. The show was over. The curtain had fallen. Elias exchanged a few more words with the police, pointing out the damage to the window and the door, assuring them that the new owners would press full charges for the destruction of property. He turned and looked directly at the security camera above the door. He knew I was watching. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was done. I looked at the screen one last time. I saw my daughter sitting in the dirt of the driveway I had paved. I saw the flashing lights reflecting off the windows of the house I had built. I saw the ruin of the life they had tried to steal. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. It was not joy. It was not happiness. It was the heavy, satisfied feeling of a structural engineer who had identified a critical failure and removed it before the whole building collapsed. I had saved myself. But I had lost my family. No, I corrected myself as I reached out to touch the screen. I did not lose them. They lost me. I pressed the disconnect button on my tablet. The screen went black, cutting off the image of the crying woman and the arrested man. The silence in my apartment was absolute. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling city. Somewhere down there in the maze of streets and decisions, a police car was carrying my son-in-law to a cell. Somewhere down there, my daughter was realizing that she was homeless and husbandless and fatherless. It was a harsh justice, but it was the only kind that stuck. I turned away from the window and looked at the photo of Martha on the nightstand. She looked back at me, her smile frozen in time, her eyes full of the kindness I had tried so hard to emulate. "I am sorry, Martha," I whispered to the empty room. "I tried to be generous. I tried to give them everything. But you were right. I gave them so much they forgot to be grateful. And now they have nothing left to forget." The weeks that followed the incident on Maple Street were filled with the kind of quiet justice that rarely makes the headlines but feels like a warm fire on a cold night. I watched the fallout from my secure apartment, not with glee but with the solemnity of a judge passing a necessary sentence. The local news carried the story of Marcus Reynolds, a former financial advisor indicted on 12 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. The camera caught him being led out of the courthouse in an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his pale complexion. He looked smaller without his expensive suits. He looked like what he was, a thief who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. The loan sharks in Aurora, seeing him in federal custody, realized they would never get their money back. They would likely leave him alone now, as prison was a protection they could not breach. But his reputation was dead. He would never handle another person's money again. He would spend the next decade thinking about the house in Boulder he almost bought with stolen funds. Kendra fared differently but no less painfully. Without Marcus's income and with her own credit cards frozen by the investigations into their joint finances, she lost their rented condo within the month. I heard through Elias that she was staying on a friend's couch, the same friend she used to brag to about her inheritance. I wondered if she told that friend the truth about why she was homeless, or if she spun a story about a cruel father who had abandoned her. It did not matter. The truth was written in the public record. She called my old number every day for 2 weeks until the line was finally disconnected. She never tried to find me at the Meridian. Maybe she was too ashamed, or maybe she knew that the fortress I had built was impenetrable. I stopped watching the security feed from the old house. The developers bulldozed it 3 weeks after the sale. I drove by once and saw the excavator tearing through the bay window I had built for Martha. It crashed to the ground in a cloud of dust and splintered wood. I thought I would feel sad, but I only felt relief. The shrine was gone. The trap had been sprung. It was time to build something new. I started visiting the inner city community center on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was a place that smelled of floor wax and old books. A place where people came to learn skills to pull themselves out of poverty. I sat in the back of the library section reading engineering journals and watching the young people study. That is where I saw Dante. He was maybe 20 years old, with the lean, hungry look of a young man who skips meals to pay for textbooks. He was there every Tuesday, sitting at the same scratched table, with a stack of civil engineering manuals that looked older than he was. He took notes in a spiral notebook with a concentration that reminded me of myself 40 years ago. One afternoon I watched him staring at a complex diagram of a suspension bridge, tracing the load-bearing lines with his finger, his brow furrowed in frustration. I stood up and walked over to his table. "That is a cantilever design," I said softly. "You have to calculate the moment at the fixed end first." Dante looked up, startled. He had dark, intelligent eyes that held a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "I have been trying to figure this out for an hour," he admitted, rubbing his face. "The textbook explains the theory, but I cannot make the numbers work." I pulled out the chair opposite him. "May I asked. He slid the notebook toward me. I took his pen, and for the next hour we were not an old man and a stranger. We were two engineers solving a problem. We talked about tensile strength and wind shear. We talked about the difference between what works on paper and what stands up in the real world. When we finally solved the equation, Dante sat back and smiled. A genuine, brilliant smile that lit up his tired face. "Thank you, sir," he said. "I seriously thought I was going to fail this module." "You are in school?" I asked. "City College," he said. "Night classes. I work construction during the day to pay the tuition. It is hard, but I want to build things. I want to build bridges." I looked at his hands. They were rough and calloused, covered in the small cuts and scrapes of manual labor. They were my hands. They were hands that knew the value of work, hands that would never steal from a father to buy a luxury car. "What is your name, son?" I asked. "Dante," he said, extending a hand. "Dante Williams." "Isaiah Hayes," I replied, shaking it. The grip was firm and honest. Over the next month I met Dante every Tuesday and Thursday. I learned that he was supporting his younger sister while he studied. I learned that he walked 3 miles to the library because he could not afford the bus fare. I learned that he had almost dropped out twice because he could not pay the semester fees. He never asked me for a dime. He only asked for knowledge. He asked about my career, about the buildings I had raised, about the mistakes I had made. He drank in my experience like water in a desert. One rainy Tuesday I came to the library early. I asked to speak to the center's administrator, a kind woman named Mrs. Ortiz, who ran the place on a shoestring budget. "I want to set up a scholarship," I told her, "for Dante Williams." Mrs. Ortiz looked at me, her eyes wide. "Mr. Hayes, that is very generous. How much were you thinking of contributing?" I pulled a check from my pocket. It was drawn on the trust account that held the proceeds from my house. The check was for $50,000. "This should cover his tuition for the next 4 years," I said, "and his books, and maybe a decent laptop so he does not have to squint at these old pages." Mrs. Ortiz covered her mouth with her hand, tears springing to her eyes. "Mr. Hayes, this changes everything for him. Do you want me to tell him it is from you?" "No," I said, watching Dante walk through the rain toward the front doors, his coat thin against the chill. "Tell him it is the Martha Hayes Engineering Scholarship. Tell him it is based on merit. Tell him someone believes he is going to build great things." I sat at my usual table as Dante rushed in, shaking the water from his hair. He sat down opposite me, breathless and excited. "Isaiah, you will not believe what happened at work today." He started telling me about a concrete pour that had gone wrong and how he had used a trick I taught him to save the batch. I listened, nodding and smiling. I did not tell him that his financial struggles were over. I did not tell him that he would never have to choose between lunch and bus fare again. I would let Mrs. Ortiz give him the news later. For now, I just wanted to enjoy the company of a young man who understood the value of what he was building. A young man who would take the opportunity I gave him and multiply it through hard work, not squander it on vanity. When we finished our session, I walked him to the door. "Keep working on those load calculations, Dante," I said. "You have a knack for it." "I will, Isaiah," he promised. "See you Thursday." I watched him walk away into the rain, his step lighter than before. I walked to my truck, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the heater. I had lost a daughter to greed, but I had found a son in the spirit of shared labor. I drove back to the Meridian, the city lights blurring in the rain. I was not just an old man with a bank account anymore. I was a mentor. I was a builder, and for the first time in a long time I felt like a father again. The rain had stopped by the time I reached the garage of the Meridian, leaving the city washed clean and glistening. I parked my truck in the designated spot between a luxury sedan and a vintage convertible. I did not feel out of place anymore. My truck had mud on the tires and scratches in the bed, but it belonged to a man who knew who he was. I took the elevator to the penthouse, the silence of the cabin wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. Inside the apartment, I walked to the kitchen and opened the bottle of wine I had saved from the old house. The 2018 Bordeaux that Martha and I had bought for a special occasion that never came. I realized now that every day of freedom was a special occasion. I poured a single glass, the rich red liquid catching the light from the city below. I walked to the balcony and stepped out into the cool night air. The wind was fresh, carrying the scent of rain and ozone. I looked out at the sprawling grid of Denver, the lights stretching all the way to the invisible mountains. Somewhere out there, Kendra was sleeping on a couch or staring at a ceiling, wondering where it all went wrong. I hoped she would find her way eventually. I hoped she would learn that you cannot build a life on the foundation of someone else's sacrifice. But that was her lesson to learn, not mine to teach. I had finished my teaching at the front door of Maple Street. I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked the screen. The security app icon was still there on the main page, a little red eye that had allowed me to witness my own vindication. I tapped it one last time. The screen showed a black void. The cameras were gone, destroyed along with the house. There was nothing left to watch. No more evidence to gather. No more traps to spring. The war was over and the general could finally retire. I pressed my finger against the icon until it started to shake. I dragged it to the trash bin and watched it disappear. Delete app. The question popped up in white letters. I tapped yes without a second of hesitation. It was a small action, just a tap of a finger, but it felt like dropping a heavy stone I had been carrying for miles. Next, I went to my contacts list. Kendra Reynolds, Marcus Reynolds. I selected them both. Block contact. Delete contact. The names vanished from my digital world just as they had vanished from my physical one. I was not being cruel. I was being healthy. You do not keep a cancerous tumor in your body just because it has been there a long time. You cut it out so you can live. I put the phone down on the small patio table and picked up my wine. I raised the glass toward the sky, toward the stars that were struggling to shine through the city glow. To us, Martha, I whispered, to the life we built and the life I am rebuilding. The wine was smooth and complex with notes of oak and dark fruit. It tasted like victory. It tasted like peace. I sat there for a long time watching the traffic on the highway below. Red taillights flowing one way, white headlights flowing the other. Everyone going somewhere, everyone chasing something. I was done chasing. I had arrived. I thought about Dante and the look on his face when he solved that equation. That was my future now. Not building houses for people who would not appreciate them, but building people who would appreciate the world. I would use my time and my resources to plant trees under whose shade I would never sit. That was the definition of a legacy. That was what Martha would have wanted. A sense of profound calm settled over me. It was not the numbness of grief or the adrenaline of revenge. It was the quiet, steady hum of a life in balance. I was 72 years old, but I felt like I was just starting. I had my health. I had my mind. I had a fortune in the bank that would ensure I never had to depend on anyone ever again. I was not a burden. I was a benefactor. I was not a victim. I was a victor. I finished the wine and stood up, feeling the cold railing under my hands. The city below was noisy and chaotic, full of striving and struggle. But up here on the 12th floor, the air was still. I turned back toward the warm light of my living room, where Martha's photo sat on the mantel watching over me. I stepped inside and slid the glass door shut, locking out the noise, locking out the past. I washed my glass and dried it, placing it back in the cabinet. I turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of the hallway lamp. I walked to my bedroom, the carpet soft under my feet. I climbed into the bed that belonged only to me in a home that was truly mine. For the first time in years, I did not worry about the phone ringing in the night. I did not worry about the next bill or the next betrayal. I closed my eyes and listened to the steady rhythm of my own heart. It beat strong and sure. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I was complete. The hardest lesson a parent can learn is that sometimes love requires drawing a hard line in the sand. Isaiah spent years believing that his endless sacrifice would secure his family's loyalty, but he discovered the painful truth. You cannot fill a cup that has a hole in the bottom. True family isn't defined by DNA, but by mutual respect and gratitude. When he finally stopped being a resource and started being a person, he found his true worth not in the house he built for them, but in the dignity he reclaimed for himself. Never set yourself on fire just to keep ungrateful people warm. If you agree that respect must be earned, even by family, please share this story.